Hello, Mark Mix, President of the National Right to Work Committee here, and I'd like to introduce you to a remarkable young man, Karl, a pipe fitter from Minnesota. And I hope you'll find Karl's story as interesting as I do. Karl's a thoughtful former member of the Pipefitters Union who, at first, was excited about his new career. But after his own investigation into the claims and promises of union officials, Karl decided on a non-union career path.
The United Association argues that unions are necessary to protect workers' safety and rights. They say that without the protection of unions, businesses will exploit workers for financial gain. Businesses certainly can abuse their power and have to exploit workers. However, it is obvious that, at least in the case of the United Association, the union has become its own machine of exploitation. Unions, like private corporations, must be held accountable, and Right to Work gives employees a way to do that.
Karl is right, and the union's 1920s one-size-fits-all top-down model is not appealing to today's employees like Karl. That's why union officials have tried to remarket and rebrand themselves as a movement, even as a social movement, rather than allow the true Depression-era inflexibility of unionism be exposed. And for example, you would probably not be surprised to hear Karl's former union and its international general president are fighting to end employees' rights to choose whether to support or refrain from a union. The choice Right to Work laws protect.
The brothers and sisters of the United Association are tough as nails. We work hard every day and expect the same of the politicians we support. We fight the so-called right to work.
Karl eventually realized that he didn't want to spend a lifetime in the relationship with the United Association Union, formerly known as the Plumbers Union. I think others can learn from Karl's experience. As you hear Karl tell his story, I hope it'll inspire others who are starting out in a new career like Karl. Karl begins with his excitement about his new pipe fitter skills and his new career.
This is where I got my start in the welding industry. The 2 years that I spent at Anoka Tech are one of the best investments that I ever made. I went from having little more than a curiosity in welding to having real marketable skills, a basic foundation of knowledge, and the ability to go out and find a job doing something that I enjoyed. This is why I was so excited to continue that education through Local 455's apprenticeship program. This is Local 455. This is where I came after Anoka Tech. I spent hundreds of hours here training on pipe welding, fabrication, rigging use and safety, and much more. It's also here that I heard the inner workings of the labor union. Here that I heard members and the business manager discuss how they would keep non-union workers from having the same opportunities that they did. It's here that I heard them discuss how prevailing wage, project labor agreements, and licensing laws in this state are influenced by the union to add things to them that make it very difficult for anyone who's not a union member to get a job and work on those projects.
Gradually, however, Karl's excitement about his union membership began to wane as his concerns about what he was hearing from union officials grew.
Another very eye-opening experience that I had in Local 455 was seeing a flyer in the Union Hall that was a message from the United Association talking about how bureaucrats in Washington are trying to destroy the UA apprenticeship program. That was very surprising to me. One, because politicians usually support any trade or work program, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, Independents, etc. And two, because why would they target the UA specifically? What would have brought the UA to their attention specifically to target? So I tried to find out what the specific legislation or act was that they were referring to. And after some digging, I found that the Department of Labor had proposed an expansion of apprenticeship programs, awarding $183 million to support the development and expansion of training programs. This included industry, employer, government, nonprofit, and union training programs. So the United Association was telling their members that bureaucrats were trying to destroy apprenticeship programs, when in fact the funds were going to expand, including union apprenticeship programs. This was rather confusing to me, until I found one union that was honest enough to say the true reason for their opposition to expanding apprenticeships: competition. More training posed a threat to their monopoly, the union's monopoly that is, because more people outside of the union would gain the skills the union was seeking to monopolize. So even if the union and their workers would be benefited from these funds that the government was going to give, they were going to frame it as an attack on apprenticeships because it would include competition. And competition in this case is opportunities for more working America.
Again, Karl is right, as you will see in the following video of the UA Union's International General President claims that this proposed training program expansion was an attack that must be stopped because our way of life depends on it.
Brothers and sisters, I'm talking to you as General President. There's an attack on our training system. I need you to go to saveuatraining.org now. Our way of life depends on it.
As time continued to pass, Karl noticed most union members were unwilling to question union officials about how funds were used or about an increase in training fees and union dues, and even more alarming, remaining silent about internal union discipline. Karl thinks this reluctance is caused by so-called union solidarity.
So solidarity means that a lot of criticisms or concerns about Local 455 are kept private, whether it's financial or work-related, because nobody wants to appear that they're disloyal, that they are not supporting the union and the workers' cause. However, hiding legitimate issues only makes them worse because now you're complying and hiding a legitimate issue. An improvement can't be made until someone sheds some light on the problem. You can't fix a problem until you recognize that it's there. And inside of the union, there is virtually no avenue for that. There's virtually no avenue to discuss and correct issues because that'll be perceived as an attack on the union and as a betrayal.
Listen, Karl doesn't think every union is bad. He's just sharing his experience. And like most people, Karl didn't want to work 30 years having to bite his tongue and not speak out for fear of losing his job and his benefits.
So if you're an organization whose stated goal is protecting workers, if you're a labor union, and you malign workers as rats, and you try to make it illegal for them to have a job like yours, you're doing something wrong. You're not representing the best interest of workers.
Because of his thoughtful observations, Karl gained a new understanding of monopoly bargaining and about the freedom right to work allows employees.
Labor unions exist to provide protections for workers, and right to work gives workers the ability to protect themselves from abuses of a labor union.
Karl's story, unfortunately, is not unique, but it often takes many years for employees to realize that forced unionism is actually harmful, not helpful. In fact, it is an old, rigged scheme which creates tremendous power for union elites and insiders. Fortunately, it's not 1935 anymore, and it's refreshing to see employees who listen and pay attention to workplace issues. Karl did, and he began to question whether he wanted to be locked into this type of top-down relationship for the next 30 years. Most people in their 20s and 30s have no desire to handcuff themselves with one career and one labor union, as perhaps their great-grandparents may have once done in the 1920s and 1930s. In fact, statistics show the average American changes careers 10 to 15 times during their working lifetime. Clearly, this can be seen as a rejection of the 1920 union employer career model embraced by big labor. I want you to know, if you've begun to feel as Karl did, you are not alone. The National Right to Work Committee is here and has been helping millions of people learn about the disadvantages created by forced unionism and union monopoly bargaining. As we fight to expand right to work freedom in every state, we're here to help you learn about your employee rights when dealing with labor union officials. In addition, we formed the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation in 1968 to provide free legal aid and advice should union officials ignore your rights. The foundation can answer your questions like, How do I resign from a union? And how do I decertify a union at my workplace? I hope Karl inspired you and perhaps gave you the courage to act. Karl took action and feeling much better about his career. Thank you for watching.